we've now got, funny enough, and this is a complete coincidence, an old friend of mine, Brian Baglow from the Scottish Games Network, who's going to talk to us about a career in esports from a play and a production and performance perspective. I think the first thing to say about Scotland with respect to video games is Scotland's a real powerhouse and always has been, both sort of culturally and commercially, in terms of video games creation. Some of you may be old enough to remember Lemmings, like a company called DNA. Amazing game from the sort of mid-90s, 16-bit game. And most of you will know Minecraft, which, although not absolutely, developed in Scotland from the beginning, a lot of it was produced in Scotland soon after the game was invented. So that's amazing. And then probably the biggest game on the planet ever is Grand Theft Auto. And that game is made mainly in Scotland, but also in Leeds. Most people don't realise that, Lemmings and Grand Theft Auto and huge parts of Minecraft are Scottish. So they should, and they hopefully will now. But Brian's going to talk to us really about where we go for, how we take that forward from a community perspective and from kind of the perspective of industry and the creativity. So look, enough of me. Brian, welcome. Do your thing.
Thank you very much, Andy, and thank you very much for spoiling the first 4 slides of my presentation, man. Come on. I was going to set the scene, but no, it's all good. It's all good. So Mike and I have been talking, and we're going to do this in a bit of a 1-2 punch. I'm going to take you through the games ecosystem in Scotland right now, and where we are, sort of the strengths, where Scotland really is still punching. And then Mike's going to take you into a lot of the roles, a lot of the areas in esports where we can build upon what we already have. Moving swiftly on, to recap what Andy very thoughtfully took you through, a lot of people were aware that Scotland has got such a strong heritage and such a really proud legacy when it comes to video games. All the way back, Lemmings just celebrated its 30th anniversary. One of the first real, international superstar hits. The game was ported to over 25 different platforms. Now owned by Sony, it's still out there. It's still being developed currently for mobile. Grand Theft Auto from the same company, DMA, initially released in 1997. That was my first entry point into the video game sector. I was the writer on Grand Theft Auto, so I got to do a lot of swearing for my first job in the games industry, and that really hasn't changed. But out of DMA Design, we got Real Time Worlds, the creators of Crackdown, and obviously APB, which didn't necessarily do quite so well, but the ambition was admirable. And again, as Andy said, Minecraft, all of the console editions are created here in Scotland by 4J. And we've got an awful lot of new companies coming through. No Code, who are based in Glasgow, are the creators of a game called Observation, which has won more BAFTAs than James McAvoy. They had to move offices just to give themselves shelf space for all the awards for that game. And more recently, Monstrum 2, the sequel to the procedurally generated asymmetric survival horror game from Junkfish in Dundee, was voted the game of the show, the UK game of the show for Gamescom in 2020. So we've got it going on, guys. We've got so much happening. But outside the big studios, we don't tend to get a lot of recognition. There's not a lot of spotlight. People aren't aware of just what's going on. So over the last year, I've actually been doing some research. I've been going out and mapping the whole of the games ecosystem, not just the industry, not just the developers, but really looking at every area of gaming in Scotland, including esports. And this is due to be delivered at the end of the month. So you guys are getting an exclusive in this. And the good news is that Scotland remains an amazing place to be if you want to get involved in video games and indeed esports. On the educational side of things, 7 universities are now producing games graduates. 11 colleges across the country are producing games students with HNCs and HNDs. We've got 2 innovation centres with InGame in Dundee and Creative Informatics in Edinburgh. And the number of people out there engaged in game studies through Abertay, obviously, but also Glasgow University they're pioneering in a lot of areas when it comes to the academic research going on into games, and a lot of this is focused around esports and competitive and professional playing. So it's a fantastically rich and varied environment if you want to study games and make it your livelihood. Then when it comes to the industry, believe it or not, and this took me by surprise, we've got over 300 active games companies across the country. Now, the vast majority are one-man operations, one-man bands. They can be part-time gigs, side hustles, or people going out and building their own games. Nick from Edinburgh College is an active game developer when he's not actually, shaking the silverware at the camera or leading his team to victory. And there's an awful lot of people out there who, over the course of the pandemic and the lockdowns, have decided to take their passion for gaming and turn it into something new. But within that 317, we've got probably about 60 to 70 major studios and what you could classify as employers. Now, that was a surprise. But then when you look around that, we've got 74 supporting companies who are providing services to the games sector across audio, marketing, animation, and pretty much every area you can think of, who are actively involved in helping people make games, helping get games onto the market. And one of the big areas of growth for Scotland is games tech. We've got an awful lot of companies out there who are looking at data. They're looking at live ops, facial capture, artificial intelligence. I was asked to do a big piece, a case study for AI in games for the launch of Scotland's AI strategy at the beginning of this week. And so the government is starting to recognise that video games has far more to offer than car theft and shooting people in the face. So again, it's just a fantastically rich and vibrant area. And everybody kind of knows that Dundee is the beating heart of video games. And it remains so. Most of the big developers are located in and around the Dundee cluster. But Dundee doesn't have it all its own way anymore. Games are spreading out across the whole of the country. I did this little map last night. And as you can see, pretty much all of the major cities and a lot of the regions around the country are really starting to pick up. I had to include Fife. I'm a Fife boy, very proud of it. 16 games companies there. Way back in the very early 2000s, we had one of the world's first mobile games companies, Digital Bridges in Dundee, and it's still continuing to produce produce new startups through colleges and through the courses that are available out there. So, you guys are in the right place. And when it comes to roles, to kind of give you a bit of context, it used to be that the idea was that you had to be a programmer, you had to be an artist. And okay, those are still core roles, but there's so much more out there. You've got production management, QA and test. There's a growing number of people out there who are now helping to promote and support games and get them out. If you can't acquire your users, then how are you going to make money out of them? And then alongside community, these are kind of, again, traditional roles, if you want to look at it that way. But these are now being supplemented by a whole new range of roles and vacancies and positions that are tying a lot more closely into esports. Whole live ops is becoming more and more relevant. So how do you run a live video game, whether it's an MMO, whether it's a multiplayer battle arena, whether it's a live sports game like Rocket League? An awful lot of companies looking for people who can help them engage with esports. Similarly, data analytics. It's vital for a lot of these games to understand your players, to be able to monetize them and bring things through. And then user acquisition, again, directly relevant to the world of esports. And a growing number of companies out there are looking for people with these skills. And when it comes to esports itself, we've got a small but growing number of organisations up here, including, obviously, Mark and the British Esports Association and the fantastic work that they're doing. But homegrown talent, we've got Esports. James and the team are doing some great things. Adam at ADL Gaming has just secured some funding to help grow what they're doing. Skelp, the Scottish Esports Hub, are all really starting to establish themselves and do a lot of really interesting work across the country. And then finally, having gone through this whole mapping thing, I started to take a look at streamers. And I will admit, guys, I kind of tapped out at about 600. We've got some serious talent here. We've got some really good people out there who are showcasing what Scotland can do in terms of live gaming, pro gaming and esports. Going from, SCO and the One Manny all the way up at close on 400,000 Twitch subscribers, all the way down to my own humble effort, which, let's say, needs a little bit of, I need to actually do something with it if I'm going to attract more subscribers. But again, what a place to be. This is an incredible country. We're doing an awful lot of things. And let's be honest, within this ecosystem, there's so much more that we can achieve. And one of the catalysts could be the creation of the new Dundee Esports Arena, which is scheduled to be finished by 2024, 4,000 seats. It's already talking to the teams at Abertay and Dundee and Angus College, specifically about using the facility for educational purposes and for really helping to bring esports through into the educational side of things. So quite frankly, it's an embarrassment of riches. It's an incredible place. The games industry has been here for the last few decades now. I really want to make sure that esports is a viable and vibrant part of the whole gaming ecosystem moving forward. That's me. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks, Brian. That was really brilliant. Sorry for stealing a bit of your thunder. That wasn't deliberate, I have to say. It's a genuine mistake on my part, but really, really great. Interesting, just I think from the viewer's perspective, the Dundee Esports Arena, and it kind of plays into something that we've been looking at British esports for a while. Football, professional football, association football, quite an important cultural part of the UK. I don't think anyone would have any argument with that. But it came out of the Industrial Revolution. And we're arguably in the fourth Industrial Revolution now. And I think the games industry has been a real driver of technology, applied technology in fun, entertainment, content. And it just feels to me like the whole of the rise of esports in parallel to video games, that the two industries together, kind of one feeds off the other. And I think we're going to see arenas being built around the games clusters in the UK pretty quickly. And I think that's good news for the education sector, because education plays a massive part in this clustering. Education and commerce being the kind of the two ends of it, really. And I think that feels like it's a really good time to be alive and to be in this sector. Some of us, like me and you, have been around for a long time, but I feel like this is the most energized it's been for a very long time, because we can see, this last 12 months has given us an insight into what happens when the world shuts down and we have to rely on online. And it's come through with flying colours, frankly. But I don't know, are you optimistic about Scotland's position right now? I am.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think we've got so much to offer. We've got all of the pieces. All we need to do is really join the dots. And we're a small country, so we absolutely should be able to. And we've already got some fantastic examples, as you've just mentioned. The stadium in Edinburgh for Heart of Midlothian, have already created a digital innovation centre, specifically so they can start to, expand out and really pull in people from the local community and their fan base and help teach them digital skills. And they're helping them to not only make video games, but get jobs, polish up their career and everything. It's all happening, and it's happening on a grassroots level, Andy. So you're absolutely right. The clustering is already there. It's already happening. We've already got so much going on with the education side of things, further and higher education into the universities. We've just had this incredible piece of research, the Logan Report, which was produced in Scotland at the tail end of last year, looking at how we create a more successful tech ecosystem, being accepted in full by the Scottish Government for 2021. They just announced this very morning that Mark Logan is going to be leading this, and it's got 7 million quid in investment to build out our tech capabilities. And obviously, gaming and esports is a very, very big part of that. So I'm incredibly optimistic, and I'm working really hard behind the scenes to make sure that gaming is included, to make sure that we're represented and taken seriously at the highest levels of government. So it's awesome. I mean, let's face it, if I wasn't doing this, I'd have to go out and get a real job, and that would suck.
On that note, thank you, Brian, for that. That was really great. Talking about optimism, positivity, can do. We're really pleased to have Mike Kent, who's the co-founder of Dexerto, who are a leading media company within esports. And just to keep it real super local, it's great because they're based in Edinburgh. So, Mike, over to you.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm just going to give a quick introduction to myself. So I've been in the esports space since about 2003 when I first realized what competitive gaming was. In 2008, I attended my first event where I flew down from Edinburgh. So I'm not originally from Edinburgh, but I actually moved here from Newcastle. And actually at that event in 2008, I was a manager of a team called Team Identity, because by then, even in a short space of time, I'd realised that I was terrible at playing, but I still wanted to be involved in esports, so I was kind of behind the scenes. And that my team actually ended up winning the event, which was great, especially as the manager, as I didn't have all the stress of playing. And then I first got involved in journalism in around 2008 on a predecessor of the website where I'm on right now. And I came basically in 2015, we launched Dexerto, which is now the world's largest esports and media platform. So although I am based out of Edinburgh and we hope to have an Edinburgh office, or we'll hope to expand the Edinburgh office, shall I say, as I sat in it. We are actually headquartered out of London. But of the 80 plus staff we have worldwide, we actually have 3 of us based in Edinburgh and a couple of more dotted around. And we hope to expand the Edinburgh team as the pandemic kind of goes away, and we'll hopefully be able to expand the Edinburgh office. I guess what I wanted to discuss and talk about was that you can actually be successful in esports and the gaming streamer space without having to be in a major city like London or New York or LA. You don't have to be in one of those self-perceived hubs, and actually, I'm kind of proof that you can be in somewhere like Edinburgh, which obviously Scotland does have a rich gaming history, but I don't think anyone's going to say it's the number one esports hub in the world. So it's kind of, I want to talk today a little bit about that. So first off, there's a lot more to esports than just competing. So everyone thinks of esports as playing and competing, and that's pretty much it. But actually, when it comes to the job market and when it comes to people, making a living from esports, most of the people are actually behind the scenes. And also with that, it's not just esports in terms of competing, it's also the gaming or gaming entertainment world. So that includes stuff like streamers, influencers across different platforms, anyone that has a kind of connection originally to esports. And it also expands out even to just, me. I, for example, and a couple of my friends could sit and play a competitive match online. It doesn't always have to be top level, multi-million-dollar esports, but and a great example of that is Dr. Disrespect. He won Streamer of the Year in 2019, and he's not actually an esports player. So I just wanted to explain some interesting statistics about esports. It kind of gives you a good perspective on why you can be remote in a place like Edinburgh or Aberdeen or Dundee or Aberdeen or wherever in Scotland, and still be able to have an influential job, and you don't need to move away in order to do it in the esports space. So I've got good friends over at hitmarker.net. They're kind of the leading esports and gaming jobs platform, and they give me some great statistics to read out. So of all jobs on their platform, which includes everything from kind of outside of esports and I suppose outside of gaming, 44,000 of those jobs have been posted in the last year, and 4,000 nearly 5,000 were remote, and that's about 11%. In esports, however, there's nearly 6,000 or 5,500 jobs, and the remote jobs constitute about half of that. So it kind of shows that you can actually work remotely in esports a lot better than just working. You don't have to move in order to do that. So some of the jobs that are in esports that I think people often forget, we've got stuff like business development and sales, social media, marketing, editorial and writing, executive and management, software engineering, coaching, graphic design, video editing, talent, and event production. So based on the data I've provided there, if you're already based in Scotland or looking to move to Scotland, there is opportunities that are remote that won't require you to move. And even prior to the pandemic, I've proved, and I'm not trying to big myself up, but I've proved that you can be successful in the esports world without having that pressure of moving to London, which is something that, I know that my co-founders were very keen on me doing, was moving away down to London to be with them. But I kind of held firm, and I'm really glad I did because, I love Scotland. It's my home. We've got great places like Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, all these other cities, and you can get connected to places around the world. So prior to the pandemic, I'd travel all around the world. I never had any issues. The fact that I was based in Scotland, Scotland is incredibly well connected, whether it be getting train, playing, whatever. So, and then despite a lot of the jobs being remote, so despite a lot of the jobs being remote, even after the pandemic, the universities in Scotland doing the right courses, they can actually make some serious esports hubs here in Scotland. Especially major cities like Edinburgh, Glasgow, even Dundee with its gaming background. Reason for that is, compared to say London, New York, LA, it's a lot cheaper to set up a business here in Scotland. It's cheaper to get office space, and obviously with so many universities that have such great education, we can basically create a hub here so that when people are more in, there's less remote jobs, or not less remote jobs, but people are in offices. It's just a lot more opportunity. So finally, on a side note of this, it's kind of wider to my point, but a place like, for example, Brian mentioned the Dundee Esports Stadium, and I personally think it's a great idea. Now, esports tournament organisers, again, don't generally decide to host an event based on the prestige or the perceived prestige of a city. So it's rare that you'll find huge tournaments taking place in places like LA, New York, London, simply because the cost is incredibly high. So somewhere like Dundee, creating this esports stadium, it could actually join a number of other cities around Europe and the world, places like Katowice in Poland, Cluj-Napoca in Romania, or Cologne in Germany, cities that aren't necessarily the first cities you're going to think of when it comes to being an esports hub, but they've become that because they've been able to provide the facilities in order to have tournament organisers come over. Because if a tournament organiser can save money in a location where they know the fans are not going to have to pay exorbitant prices for hotels, and they're not going to have to pay huge prices to host an event, they're going to be far more likely to do that, because then they can put more money into prize money, or they can just be more profitable. So I think the idea that, a lot of people, when I post on Twitter, were like, oh, why Dundee? But it's like, why not? It's close to Edinburgh. It's got great transport links. It's already got a heritage there. It's an up-and-coming city. And once again, tournament organisers are very keen because it's going to be affordable in order to host an event there. However, when it comes to one thing I did want to speak about today is esports in universities and courses and college courses. It's somewhat of a controversial topic, but myself and a lot of other industry veterans don't believe that there should just be a broad esports courses. And actually instead, what we need is people with traditional skills, like I mentioned before, accounting, business development, event planning, with elements of esports mixed into those. It's not just possible to teach esports as a whole, we don't believe, but instead we want to, I think it should be event specific, or it should be specific to certain areas. So in order to articulate that a little bit better, I actually reached out to a few of my colleagues. So one of them is Chris Marsh. He's one of my co-founders and one of the driving forces behind Dexerto, especially in the back end. And he basically said the problem we're seeing in many esports degrees is they're incredibly broad. So the qualification you come out with doesn't really prepare you for any real jobs. I believe that these courses, to become viable, they should teach a useful skill, but through the lens of esports. Or you could do esports event management. This could effectively set people up for a career in events management, because ultimately a lot of skills will be the same, but taught through their love of esports. They'll learn all about budgeting, the procedure, logistics, coordination, and be prepared for the job market. We're just not seeing that right now, but instead esports courses comprise modules that almost have no real-world application. We're also seeing some courses teaching tactics and video games, which appears to me to be a completely wrong approach. If you look at sport, for example, you don't go to uni to qualify to coach football. The coaching bodies run the qualifications. I also reached out to Adam Fitch, who's an award-winning journalist and part of the Dexerto team. And he said, as we've seen in universities in England, esports has been introduced to the curricula inefficiently. If universities in Scotland were to weave esports into relevant subjects, they would then give students a head start on properly understanding our industry as well as others. From there, we'd have a well-equipped cohort who not only could integrate into esports, but understand how to change it for the better, should they decide it's something they're interested in. If not, they would have applicable skills elsewhere. So in summary, I believe Scotland's in a fantastic position. I think if universities kind of take this advice on, I'm sure they are. I feel really strongly about Scotland being a future hub for esports, gaming and influence entertainment, both from a jobs and education perspective. And hopefully in some way I can help develop the place that I've adopted to come home to become that. So thanks very much.
Mike, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for that. That insight's great. And you hit on something that's close certainly to my heart, has been for a long time, this whole sense of place. Some of you might detect there is a London accent here. I don't live in London anymore. But there's been too much emphasis on everyone having to go to places like London or LA or New York to make their businesses. That's all changed. And it's changed now, I think, positively out of the pandemic. People have realized that you don't have to schlep into one place to work, but you can work online and you can balance it. And I think that the video games industry in the UK, which, you know, we're very proud of, has got a number of hubs that are spectacularly distributed through the United Kingdom. And there's not really much logic to it outside of two things. Either a very, very hot, relevant education organisation. Abate is a fantastic example of that, for example. Or there's been a business founders have set up. So, for example, in England, there's Leamington Spa, which, you know, the last thing it was known for was being sort of spa baths for the Georgians. Okay, now it's a massive hub for video games production. Why? Because Codemasters set up in that area on a farm 30 years ago. And over the years, people have worked at Codemasters, have moved on and set their own businesses up. And because of the digital revolution, that's been possible. So that's like amazing, really. I think what you're doing is, you know, hats off, even though you've got your hat on, hats off.
Yeah, you don't want to see my hair. It's blocked down hair.
Hats off to you, you know, to locate the business in Edinburgh. There's been some questions in the chat, which I think are really, really interesting. There's a fellow sort of journalist here who's talking. He says, Mike, I'm on a sports journalism course. It's incredibly difficult to get across how important esports actually are. Any advice how to combat that?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I think that what he needs or she needs to do is they need to basically just find that esports experience through stuff like voluntary roles. So, for example, on Hitmarker, you can go on there and look for part-time or voluntary positions, internships, and really what he needs to do is basically to learn about esports and what's going on through and get experience doing that if he's not able to convince otherwise. I think the best way to convince people, though, is just to talk about the money. I think if you just find top level statistics when it comes to money and tournaments and be like, you know, this Dota 2 tournament had $35 million prize pool and there's millions of people watching. The statistics everywhere. Look at Newzoo, look at, you know, we've posted some information on statistics before. So I think there's a lot of statistics and information that you can use in order to convince someone. But ultimately, it's going to be a hard sell, and you're better off just getting the experience yourself rather than trying to convince someone who's probably not going to be that interested.
Okay, fair point. So just for both of you, just got a couple more minutes, really. There's a question here about, it says, like, as esports become more professionalised and players potentially work 24/7 to improve, do either of you worry about the balance between screen time and sort of connecting face to face?
Absolutely, I think it's.
Sorry, Mike.
Go, Brian.
No, go.
Yeah.
Go, Mike.
So yeah, it's absolutely a problem, and actually, what's happened and what we've noticed as esports become more professional, they end up having, for example, the big teams and the big franchise leagues that pay millions of dollars to get involved. They started to get involved with nutritionists, sleep coaches, psychologists, the whole array that you'd get with sport as well. And people kind of are slowly but surely learning that you don't actually need to play 7 days a week, 14 hours a day to do that. But ultimately, that is just what's going to happen. People are already doing it outside of esports. People sat on their phones all day. People sat in front of computers or TVs watching Netflix. So I actually think that when it comes to esports, for me personally, my mum and dad used to be really worried about me being online all the time when I was younger, playing on Xbox Live, and worried that I was just speaking to all these random people. But actually, that kind of made me who I am today. It made me far more comfortable speaking to people in public, speaking to different types of people. And I ended up meeting up with all these different people, obviously pre-pandemic, at all these different tournaments, and I've made friendships that I can count across the world. I don't know many people who went to my school that can kind of say they're good friends with people based literally from Australia to LA. So I think actually esports is a great way of bringing people together. And, yes, there's a lot of screen time, but I think there's just a lot of screen time in general these days.
Cool. Brian, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the best and worst things about video games. We do engagement better than any other type of media in the world. People can spend hundreds and sometimes thousands of hours playing games, and unless you're a really slow reader, there's pretty much not any other, type of content out there that can give you that kind of engagement. So on the one hand, it's a fantastic way, as Mike was just saying, to bring people together. And we've had so many examples. The BBC did a documentary recently about all the benefits of gaming and the ways in which it can help players to find other people to relate to. But, within our industry, and you've seen the issue of crunch and people working ridiculous hours. And it's because it's passion driven. People get into the games industry because they want to make games. People play video games because it's really good fun. So there has to be balance. And I think when you're looking at esports as a profession, as a career, then it introduces a whole other level of reasons for people to spend that time online. I think as a sector, we need to be quite proactive in saying, okay, this is not best practice, this is suboptimal, or just that's really stupid. You need to get up, move around, get outside, have some fresh air. And this is Scotland. You might not believe it with the sunshine coming in through the window, but you've got to switch off at some point because it's just everything in moderation. So it's an issue that I think we have to be proactive about.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, getting the balance right. I think, Mike made some great points about sort of health, well-being, fitness, that those, as you see more role models as a player, whether you're casual or you're a wannabe pro, you've got to start to understand that it's not just screen time and playing the games, it's everything else that goes with it, and it's having that balance. And I think that's a great opportunity.
The image of the unfit gamer, I think, is one of the past. And actually, if you look at a lot of esports players now, they're often, pretty shredded. They have diet plans, routines. They do fitness workouts. So, I think people are realizing the benefits as well of being in peak physical condition in order to be the best players, which is probably why I've struggled for so long.
Well, you're spot on there, Mike, because I think for what it's worth, as profiles get bigger, personas get bigger, there's going to be much more realization that not only that stars are real role models, but in order to sustain that level of ability and competitiveness, you've got to do more than just be playing games. You've got to take care of your body, to take care of your mind, and get a balance. Well, look, that's brilliant, guys. Thanks so much for your time. Amazing. And just massive thank yous to both of you for putting so much time into this. Appreciate it.